fun house. This last laughter is especially much too long and will be compensated for in the final composite dub. Then follows the weighing machine sequence. This is balanced as approximately like this. The coin goes into the machine, it runs through a gizmo, a ratchet goes, which is either the dial spinning on the machine or else the mechanism working. Then there's the thud of the ticket being printed, and then the small sh of the ticket being delivered. Happy motoring. See you in June. Dear Bo and T, the following are the wild sound effects which go at the beginning of the film. First, you have studio laughter, then the gunshot as heard through the radio, then follows radio music and carnival music, which will be supplied later, then the shooting gallery sequence, and then laughter in the fun house. This last laughter is especially much too long and will be compensated for in the final composite dub. Then follows the weighing machine sequence. This is balanced as approximately like this. The coin goes into the machine, it runs through a gizmo, a ratchet goes, which is either the dial spinning on the machine or else the mechanism working. Then there's the thud of the ticket being printed, and then the small sh of the ticket being delivered. Happy motoring. See you in June. Dear Bo and T, the following are the wild sound effects which go at the beginning of the film. First, you have studio laughter, then the gunshot as heard through the radio, then follows radio music and carnival music, which will be supplied later, then the shooting gallery sequence, and then laughter in the fun house. This last laughter is especially much too long and will be compensated for in the final composite dub. Then follows the weighing machine sequence. This is balanced as approximately like this. The coin goes into the machine, it runs gizmo, a ratchet goes, which is either the dial spinning on the machine or else the mechanism working. Then there's the thud of the ticket being printed, and then the small sh of the ticket being delivered. Happy motoring. See you in June. Dear Bo and T, the following are the wild sound effects which go at the beginning of the film. First, you have studio laughter, then the gunshot as heard through the radio, then follows radio music and carnival music, which will be supplied later, then the shooting gallery sequence, and then laughter in the fun house. This last laughter is especially much too long and will be compensated for in the final composite dub. Then follows the weighing machine sequence. This is balanced as approximately like this. The coin goes into the machine, it runs through a gizmo, a ratchet goes, which is either the dial spinning on the machine or else the mechanism working. Then there's the thud of the ticket being printed, and then the small sh of the ticket being delivered. Happy motoring. See you in June. Dear Bo and T, the following are the wild sound effects which go at the beginning of the film. First, you have studio laughter, then the gunshot as heard through the radio, then follows radio music and carnival music, which will be supplied later, then the shooting gallery sequence, and then laughter in the fun house. This last laughter is especially much too long and will be compensated for in the final composite dub. Then follows the weighing machine sequence. This is balanced as approximately like this. The coin goes into the machine, it runs through a gizmo, a ratchet goes, which is either the dial spinning on the machine or else the mechanism working. Then there's the thud of the ticket being printed, and then the small of the ticket being delivered. Happy motoring. See you in June. Dear Bo and T, the following are the wild sound effects which go at the beginning of the film. First, you have studio laughter, then the gunshot as heard through the radio, then follows radio music and carnival music, which will be supplied later, then the shooting gallery sequence, and then laughter in the fun house. This last laughter is especially much too long and will be compensated for in the final composite dub. Then follows the weighing machine sequence. This is balanced as approximately like this. The coin goes into the machine, it runs through a gizmo, a ratchet goes, which is either the dial spinning on the machine or else the mechanism working.
Hola, buenos días, bienvenidas todas, bienvenidos todos. La traducción simultánea de esta presentación del álbum Marauder de Interpol la estará haciendo mi compañera Ileana Rodríguez, que está acá en la cabina, por si gustan acompañarnos con el audífono. A partir de este instante vamos a hacer el resto de la presentación en inglés. Buenos días a todos y muchas gracias por venir a la presentación de Marauder. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us in this Life or Death matter. It might sound like a lot for a press conference for presenting a new album, but think for a second about this in this very instant and in this very moment of the century we're living. Art gives us the chance to survive by talking to each other. Books are a chance of talking to each other. Records are another one of those chances. These conversations are not a two-way road where the artist sends musical notes and receives back the clapping of the audience. They are something bigger. They are worldwide communities generating their own ways to love, share, analyze, read, and reread the art they are devoted to in the small, infinite rooms of global instant messaging. Adapted to new forms of cultural reaching, artworks keep on saving our lives. They give us some shade in the burning sidewalk of life where we walk wearing the black clothing of our hearts. They give us a space of freedom where we can talk about all the important things without obviously having to talk about the important things. And then you also have to think about the creators. They reach Olympic perfection on every single detail of every single song. They analyze once and again how everything sounds on their tiny cell phone speakers and how the new songs will work in the context of a full arena. Our guest this morning dedicated several weeks from December 2017 through April 2018 to the life or death task of recording their 6th studio album. For the first time in their career, they worked with producer Dave Fridmann, who has also been a creative partner of MGMT, Mercury Rev, The Flaming Lips, and of course, legendary Café Tacuba. They are here to introduce us to the Rover, their new single, part of their new album, Marauder. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Paul Banks, Mr. Sam Fogarino, and Mr. Daniel Kessler, Interpol. continuación pedirles atentamente a mis compañeros fotógrafos que tomen sus lugares para iniciar esta charla. Al final, me comentan que al final vamos a hacer la foto en las escaleras. Muchas gracias, compañeros.
Pasamos a la sala, por favor. Gracias.
Muchísimas gracias a todos.
Thank you.
Te ves increíble, Paul.
Gracias.
Gracias, compañeros. Muchas gracias. Good morning. Thank you for being here in Mexico City and welcome. Check.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Last time the city saw you live was for the 15th anniversary of Turn on the Bright Lights. And now you are introducing us to a new album, Marauder. How did that experience impact, if at all, the recording of this new album?
Well, we had been working on the new material, which became Marauder, for several months. And that's very, insular. We're just in a basement working on songs together. And then all of a sudden, you're asked to go and perform your first album live. So simply put, it just injected that live energy into the process, because then we went back to the basement, after all that excitement. So it just simply that, to go out and, revisit your first record, and it was very well received, those shows, especially here with these people. So it simply brought that excitement into the writing and then later recording process.
Paul, journalists have been listening to the record all week. Libertad Ampuria of Milenio newspaper sends the next question. The titles of your albums have always had a story behind them. For example, El Pintor is an anagram of Interpol. I want to know about Marauder. Why did you choose this name?
I mean, I think it's a little bit like in the case of Bright Lights, where it comes from a lyric. So Marauder is a kind of like a character that appears in a number of the songs and is actually mentioned in the song Stay in Touch. And it's sort of, I think there's a few characters in this record, but that being one that sort of bubbles up repeatedly. And the fact that, it sounds good. I think it's a snappy title. Yeah, it's sort of, I guess it's sort of taking one element of the record and kind of like putting that at the forefront as an introduction. I think it also combines really nicely with the album artwork.
Daniel, Stephanie Carmona of Sopitas.com asks, we all know Mexico is your second home. What inspires you the most about this place, and why did you choose to launch your new album here?
I really love coming to Mexico City in particular, as often as I can. I always find it to be a wonderful place to come to reset my brain and put myself in a good place. There's so much to be inspired from here in general, from the rich history and culture and so forth, that it's, I learn something new each and every time. I've been coming here for so many years and quite frequently, but I feel like I've still only scratched the surface. So it always makes me want to come back and just go a little bit deeper. And I think, as far as why we'd want to kind of start here, is that Mexico's just been is the country that sort of really, I think unconditionally has been supportive of us in a way that's unparalleled to any other place in the world. So in that sense, there was really no better place than to begin it here. How could we begin it anywhere else?
Sam, after creating 5 studio albums, what kind of artistic partnership did you look for in a producer? How did you arrive at the decision to work with Dave Fridmann?
Well, first, we never really worked with a proper producer. We've always kind of self-produced and used that energy to concentrate on what engineer we would pick. And this time it just kind of felt right. We just started talking about maybe, kind of bringing somebody in for that kind of partnership. And just through, personally, I've been a fan of Dave Fridmann's for, years, decades. And, we have contemporaries, friends, Mogwai, Spoon, that all had really good results. So it just was an easy decision to make, and the proof is in the record. It was probably one of our better decisions thus far.
I know he works in rural New York. That's where the album was recorded. Daniel, how was it like holding up with that process in the middle of nowhere? How did that experience influence the record?
Well, the studio is about an hour outside of Buffalo, but very much in the countryside, and it's very nice, but it's also, there isn't, we recorded from, during the winter time, so it was, it's one of the colder parts of the United States, and it snows pretty much every 4 minutes, and then as soon as they clear the streets, it snows again, and then, so essentially you have to grow accustomed to the fact that it's a really harsh, heavy winter, and it's actually very close to where we were trapped on a highway for 3 days during open tour. So we went back to the scene of the crime, and but what was great about it was that we'd go there for 2 weeks at a time every month during the recording session, and it allowed us to really focus on what we were doing. We knew exactly why we were there, what we were trying to accomplish, and I think it'd be a lot more difficult. It would have been a lot more difficult if the results hadn't felt so gratifying, and the relationship between us and Dave felt so rewarding as well. So essentially, I think that sort of kind of informed the fact that we were so pleased where we were going, and we were very enthusiastic about the process. I think it kind of kept us going there and kept motivating us to keep going forward and keep building what would become Marauder.
Now, Paul, we just heard the Rover and your way down here in the stairs. What made you want to introduce Marauder with that song?
Why did we choose the Rover?
As the first single, yes.
Single? I think it's in the context of the batch of songs that we put together. I think it's probably the most direct and immediate kind of punchy rock song that we have. I think it's just a nice re-emergence for us just to come out with a sort of tight fist, quick, succinct banger, as they say.
It's got a beat and you can dance to it.
It's got a beat and you can dance to it. Yeah.
Now, Sam, talking about beats, we are told you got kicked out of practice, the band got kicked out of practice space for playing too loudly. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, it's always the drums that gets us in trouble. So we were in a basement in a residential building. Do we want to talk about drums being too loud again?
Daniel, can you describe the creative energy going into the studio this time, and how was your approach different from other Interpol albums?
Well, as Sam mentioned earlier, I think doing the Bright Lights tour was something new for us. So in that sense, it sort of kind of changed the process. Normally we don't tour in between. We put out a record, then we tour for 18 months, and then we disappear, we write, we come back together, we have a new record, and we repeat. This time we started the writing process, we got pretty far, then we put a bookmark basically in the writing process for Marauder and went to do these anniversary shows. And at that point, the songs had been probably somewhere 80, 90% complete, but we just left them alone for a couple months, and then we came back, we picked them up, we picked up where we left off, and I think we felt just as enthusiastic as before the tour, and it just kind of changed us. I think we had a little bit, so I think the Bright Lights tour gave us a little bit of energy, kind of, just sort of, it was a new energy to tap into, basically go touring between the records, like in the middle of writing a new record. And then I think the fact that we felt cohesively very, very enthusiastic about what we were doing, kind of as we were building this new record, as we were building Marauder, each time we completed a new song, I think we felt more like we're going in the right place. It just felt like a new thing, the whole thing felt. So the combination of doing the Bright Lights tour while writing Marauder, and then just something about this record felt, the songwriting of this record, the songs themselves, just felt like we were kind of getting to a new place, and the joint enthusiasm that I think we had together for the songs that would become Marauder, I think was something about it just felt a little bit different.
Now, Paul, can you elaborate on the lyrics throughout the album? Are there any concepts or themes? How did you work on the lyrics this time around?
I spent a lot of time on the lyrics to this record. I really enjoyed writing the lyrics for this record, and I think. I'm sorry. Was the question as far as what my process was?
More about like your process of going maybe to a specific space for writing the lyrics.
I wrote a lot on a beach. That's like a happy place for me and a very open, creative place. I also, it's really, for the most part, I will react to the music, and that always, some songs, they just come very quickly. I think the Rover, for instance, was probably the first day that Daniel and I were working on that song. The first track on the record, same way. I think the lyric and the melody came instantly, and then that gives me like that song is If You Really Love Nothing, and that then gives me kind of a starting point, and that wherever that thought comes from, which I think is sometimes kind of like an automatic writing, subconscious thing, I just sort of expand from there. And I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question, but I definitely invested a lot of time and found a lot of enjoyment working on this one.
Was that process connected to the picking up the album artwork, the photograph on the cover?
In a way, I think that's what when we found that particular image by Winogrand, that I think it really kind of spoke to some of the themes. I think it spoke to the idea of the Marauder, which is sort of an isolated figure, and I think it really resonated with that particular song, Stay in Touch, that idea of this sort of vulnerable figure at a table, sort of, and I think also there's maybe some themes involving accountability and looking at yourself maybe not from such a totally abstract point of view lyrically as I've often done, but a little bit more direct and a little bit more autobiographical. So I don't know where I took your question, how it got to this answer, but I hope that
it makes
does
total
answer it.
sense. Now, Daniel Jorge Santamarina of Excelsior newspaper asks, this is your 6th album. Do you see Marauder as a back to your roots record?
No, not at all. I don't think we ever look at trying to do something that we've done previously. I think it's every record, and Marauder included, it's supposed to be the next chapter forward. And Marauder really is very much so. It's a representative of the band since El Pintor, really, since we toured El Pintor for a good amount of time. We started writing songs for Marauder probably around some 2016, 2017, and so. I don't think so. I think it felt more like just like this, we got together in the room, and then there was this energy in the room, and it felt like more like we're moving forward rather than trying to return. I don't think we ever look at trying to. It feels like a waste of energy trying to do something you've done previously. We're still the same people making this music, so of course it's going to be semblances, and you're going to recognize our approaches and so forth. But I do think Marauder's representative of the band now, moving forward, and it's the latest sort of version that we can offer of that, the latest example, and I think we feel pretty enthusiastic about it.
Indeed. The next question is for Sam and comes from Andrea Jurado of Indie Rocks magazine. While making Marauder, were you thinking about playing it live? Did the recording process translate easily to the live performance?
Well, we definitely weren't thinking of playing live, but the songs were written live. And we recorded live, so I imagine it's going to translate pretty well. I think there's something inherent in the structure of the songs. I think there was, while we didn't really kind of categorically say we're not going to do this or that, there was we paid respect to the vibrance of the song. So it was kind of just in the music itself that really dictated, keep it live, keep it in that arena, rock and roll, kind of visceral.
And I think, going straight to tape.
Yeah, indeed. The process of working with Dave Fridmann, recording it, being almost handcuffing yourself in a way to just not rely on digital technology to make it easy. We kind of worked. We recorded old school to tape, not many edits, and
as a band.
You can
you can make records now piece by piece, like email one guy, you don't even actually have to play all together in a room, but we really made it our beeswax, as they say, to like this record is sort of the band playing live, straight to tape, destructively. You know, if you run out of room on the tape, you just got to delete a pass, which is very different than a lot of records in Pro Tools. It's just like thousands of takes you could reference and comp from, and so this is pretty raw.
And it was interesting, you know, going back to Dave Fridmann, this is someone who has command of both forms. Like can really go traditional with just, you know, analog gear, going to tape, not relying on edits or whatever. But then he has a whole other palette, you know, working with like Flaming Lips, who are bands like that who are very edit heavy, very, very production heavy. It's a part of their process built into the songs. And when, you know, I wanted him to kind of like ease up a little bit, you know, maybe I don't want to do this again, you know, it's just like, no, we're making it this way.
Now, we are joined online by fans from all around the world, and they have sent some questions for you. Interpol fan Edgardo asks, which of your albums do you like the most, and which one is the song you love to play live the most?
They're all of our children.
Well, our newest child, Marauder, I mean, we're here right now. This is our best record yet.
This is the best one.
Yeah,
Best one yet.
simply
Trust us.
put.
It's a baby.
Kurt sent the next question. How did you write these new songs? Can you describe a little bit the writing process for Marauder?
Daniel?
Sam?
Well, I mean, we set up, you know, Daniel, I don't know what he does on his own time, but then we all meet together and he does like some ideas, and then we're there in a room and Paul does his thing, and it's bass first. Well, you can speak.
Sorry, go ahead.
Who is in charge, for example, of making the first call? Who calls who for, you know what, let's make a new album?
I think Daniel's the most organized fella in the band, and you know the songs begin with chord progressions and guitar parts that he's introducing. So I think it's sort of, you know, when he's got a batch, we kind of go in and begin that process of sort of building around those songs.
And I think for this, I think initially maybe there's a few the first few sessions were like Paul and I just kind of in the room and seeing where we're at. And then I think as you were mentioning before, like If You Really Love Nothing and the Rover, early ones that we touched on, which are the first, second song of the record. And it was pretty clear to see. I think Paul started singing the main melody in If You Really Love Nothing right away. And it was very different than what I would have imagined when I was playing the chord progression on my own. And then right away we could see that there was a new path forward. And I think then Sam came shortly after that, and then we sort of proceeded to writing all the songs in the same room together and developing them. And I think when we get into something like 4 or 5 songs, or this time, I think when we get to like 4 or 5 songs in general, I think in any writing process, and we feel this enthusiasm for it and excitement, we start seeing, okay, the possibility of a new record is there. It's attainable. We have new ideas. We're ready. Versus, unfortunately, I don't think we've gone into the room and hit a roadblock and said, okay, we need some more time apart, or we're not ready to start this writing process for a new album. And this was no different this time. We got in the room and we basically had this energy. We felt pretty excited about the songs, and they just kind of went from there. So it's just like that. I think you have to be in the room. The songs have to be moved forward, and then that's sort of how it dictates. Okay, so we're starting to build towards what will be a new record.
So I guess that when you have that kind of energy, the hard part is knowing when to stop. How do you know when the record's done?
That's true, and that's where, again, going back to Dave Fridmann, becoming this fourth element that is like, no, that's done. And you sit and you go, what? Are you sure? He's like, no, it's done. It was really, I think he was very crucial to that. And it kind of lets you just go and blah. And then he kind of, exactly, that's what happens.
And I
he
think
kind of
too,
hones it in.
I think too it's when as we were talking about earlier, we don't go to the studio until we're basically, the songs really are kind of fully formed, or more or less fully formed, meaning that we could either go, one way we could almost go play like a live show, because the songs have a beginning and an end and so forth, or we could go to the studio. So in that sense, we have a bit of we're not one of those bands, or we haven't been today one of those bands that goes in the studio and then we'll write the middle section. There's nothing against that. it's good or bad to do it the way we are. I don't know, but so far we've gone to the studio when we could almost go play a live show, and that's sort of like the barometer for knowing that, like, okay, these songs we can actually record them and sort of document them.
I think we have time for one more question. This one is from Interpol fan Junwen. She asks, what motivates you to continue being in a band?
Wow. I always quit the band after every record, so that's what motivates me to
Rejoin.
Yeah.
You sign a new contract
Why do you
every...
rejoin? I mean, I think it's just...
No, go on.
I think that the creative drive is something that you probably do have to protect and sort of nurture in yourself. I think we're all fortunate enough to sort of... I still feel very attached to music and in love with this adventure. And then I think also when you have great collaborators where there's just like, what makes, I think, a good band is chemistry between the musicians. And I think as long as that sort of chemistry still happens, it's sort of like I might not have any great ideas on any given day, and then I hear one of Daniel's progressions, and it's sort of like, oh, okay, I can definitely interact with that. And then it sort of gets even more compounded with Sam's input. So I think we're just lucky to have each other as collaborators, and I think lucky to still want to do this.
And then I think the thought that you can do something better than what you've done previously, I think it's just one of the driving points. It's not necessarily the driving point, but the fact that when you start writing, you start kind of really believing in the new songs, that you feel really good that you're like, yeah, I think these are just as good as anything else we've done ever. And I think artistically, you should always feel that way.
Now, Marauder is out on August 24th. The band will be playing a release show for their hometown in New York City at House of Bands as part of their global tour. The Rover is available now everywhere, and you can catch them performing the song live tomorrow night at The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.